Hello and welcome to part 8 of the Tim Burton style character. This is David Ward, and when last I left you, we had just started working on the texture painting with the texture layers and everything, paint layers. I'll go and turn my screencast keys on as usual. So now we're going to go in and work on that just a little bit further. If we render out what we have so far, you can see it works okay, but what if you want to add some more color to it? Like instead of the blackish, really dark grayish blue, say you want to add it more of a bright blue or something like that. With the current setup, that would be a little bit difficult. So what we're going to do is instead of having the ambient occlusion mapped on top of that single color, we're just going to combine them into one texture. So the way we do that is we go ahead and tab into edit mode, select everything, come over here, add a new image. Okay, go ahead and set the width and height to 2048, and let's just call this one texture combined. Okay, and we'll go ahead and I moused out so it didn't let me say okay. So new image, same thing, texture combined 2048, and now okay. Okay, so it created the new texture. So now what we need to do is go ahead and tab out of edit mode, come over to your render settings, and just do like we did with the ambient occlusion. We're going to bake them together. And so we'll go, instead of ambient occlusion, we'll say textures, and it'll bake everything that's acting as a texture and flatten it down into one image over here. So we'll go ahead and hit bake, and you can see it's starting to bake that out. And like again with the ambient occlusion, this might take a little bit to do, so I'll go ahead and pause recording until that's done. So we'll be right back. Okay, and there we have it. We now have the bluish grayish texture with the ambient occlusion applied to it. So now we need to come over here to our material settings and then go to the textures, and we can go ahead and get rid of that one there at the top. So just go ahead and X that guy out, and we can select everything and bump it up the line. Okay, now go ahead and select the Tim Mesh color, come down to image, and right there on the little thumbnail, go ahead and click that and choose the texture combined instead. And we also need to come down here under influence, and instead of multiply, change that back to mix. And there we go. So now if we look through here, go ahead and render out, it should look exactly the same, even though we deleted that blue texture, or that blue blend ramp there. So there we go. Now, like I said, say we want to make things a little bit different, a little more color to our scene, just a little bit. We know most Tim Burton films and things of that nature are very subdued, very, well, in certain places. I guess Edward Scissorhands, the houses were quite bright and colorful in the neighborhoods. But anyways, let's make the eyelids, instead of that dark black, we'll go to our, go to our texture paint here. Instead of having them that dark gray, let's make them more of a, not really a bright blue, but a little bit lighter. Maybe about like that. And I'm not going to paint that over here because for some reason when you try to paint with higher res meshes, it tends to take a little while. So we'll do it over here. But let's go ahead and tab into edit mode so we can see where our eyelids are. There's the 3 there, and then there's 1 right there. And in case you were wondering, this is the inside of the mouth, and then this is the tongue. We'll paint those also later on. But let's just worry about the eyes now. Go ahead and paint those, and over here make sure you're in image painting there in case you're not. And tell you what, instead of having that blurred edge, that faded edge, let's go to our paint curve down here and change that to, let's make it this one right here, so we'll have more of a solid edge. But if you want to make it even sharper, just drag these points up here and it'll be like so. Let's go ahead and set the strength way up, radius down a little bit. That way we're not having to brush back and forth, back and forth. Okay. And be careful right there by the tongue because you don't want to overlap, oops, like that. There we go. Okay, almost there. And then this guy over here. And there we go. So now if we tab out over here, you can see now he has the blue eyelids. So it's not really fitting the rest of the head, so let's go ahead and go to the face area here. And let's increase the outline there around that, make that a little bit darker, maybe a little bit of a more purplish tint to it, and a little darker. And let's set the paint curve size back down to the default right there on the far left. And okay, I'll just come in here and just tell you what, on this part, let's go ahead and multiply this one as well. So that's a little bit too dark. Let's just leave it on mix, I guess, and set the strength down a little bit. Maybe even further. Okay. So we can get an idea of what that's looking like over here. Let's over in this window, let's hit N to clear the Properties tab and then T to clear the Tool panel, so we can kind of see what we're doing a little bit easier. And we'll just paint these guys in there. And now that's blue's a little too bright, I think, so let's maybe darken that up a little bit more. There we go. You can see that top lid there. Okay, and finally this guy. Okay, so that's looking a little bit better. Now the lips also need a little bit of color, so let's come in and do the same thing down here. Make our brush really small. About 5 looks like. There we go. And just paint over that gray right there. And it should give us the color we're looking for on the lips. Okay, so there we go. If you want to add some more little details, let's give a little bit of color there over the ears. Set the radius up a little bit and just do a quick little dot there just to give it a little hint of color. And then maybe let's increase the brightness there and make it more of a very light tint there, and set the strength way down. Just going to give it just a little bit of highlight there on the forehead, and maybe come down here on the cheeks as well. Maybe a little bit on the chin. Set the radius down, and on the nose. Maybe a little too much there. Set the strength even further down if we can. Okay, so I think that's looking all right. Honestly, I think the eyes might be still a little bit too colorful. Oi, I hate to keep working the same thing. When I'm working on my own, I can spend hours, getting things to look just the way I want them to. Okay, so let's just get this subdued down a little bit. And all these guys, make the brush a little bit bigger. Make things go a little faster there. Maybe not that big. Another little a lot of trial and error there. There we go, that looks good. And finally, this guy over here. Now you can keep playing with this if you like, but I'm going to leave it as is. Okay. And one thing we need to do before we go any further is go ahead and make sure we do the inside of the mouth. So let's go ahead and select all these guys and hide that, and then we'll select each one of the gums so we can see which one of these guys over here this is. I guess come out of image painting so we can see which ones are highlighted. Okay, so that's the gums, those two shapes there. And then let's go ahead and see which ones the teeth are as well. Okay, so there, and then okay, so let's see if we can't go ahead and just paint it in the 3D view. Well, I guess we can't since the rest of the model is there, but okay, so let's do this individually. Select the gums, okay, and then we'll those two guys. Okay, so now we'll come back to image painting, and let's go ahead and set them to be the same color as the lips, which will the inside of the mouth also will be. So you just come in here and just right click there in the middle, and it'll set that as your color. So just expand that out. Okay, now come up here, there it is, and maybe make our brush a little smaller. Okay, and then this one here. Okay, and then the teeth, we can just make those solid white. There we go. And let me make the edge of my brush a little sharper so I don't accidentally overlap right there. So let's do right there. Okay, and then finally down here. I don't know why it really arranges these so far apart, since on the model themselves they're right next to each other. But there you go. Okay, so we need to do the inside of the mouth and then the tongue. So let's go ahead and select that color again. Just right click in there. Maybe, there we go. Okay, and let's get the tongue in. And then the rest of the inside of the mouth over here. Okay. Now you can see in some of these places it's kind of the UV coordinates are not colored in on some parts, and you can really tell in certain places, like for example the wrist right here. Actually, I think that might have something to do with that being right there. So let me right click there and just kind of paint that back on there. Okay, so you can see if we don't have the color set to the extreme edge there, you might get some overlap on accident. So one thing you can do is, if we can do it over here, let's go ahead and turn our tool palette back, and let's go up to soften, and let's try to soften those edges there. Doesn't want to work. It's not wanting to work too well. Okay, so let's just select this color here and just paint in real gently along the edges there. Make our brush a little smaller. There we go. See, that looks a lot better. Do it on this side as well. And on this hand. There we go. And then right there too. Okay. So that seems to be pretty well set for the most part. So, okay. I think we're seeing some of his teeth through the skin there, yeah. So maybe when we make the shape keys later on for the facial expressions, we'll seal the lips a little bit better. But I think for now, all of our textures are painted, or as far as the colors go. So let's go ahead and hit N on our 3D view over here and come down and make sure we save the paint layers. I'm just going to save all those textures. Okay. And now, like I said, we can add a bump map, and I'd like to add just some real subtle wrinkles to the face. So let's go ahead and turn on that layer right there. And we can go ahead and probably collapse this panel now. And the bump layers work pretty much the same as the specular layers, where black is going to go down and white's going to come up. Now, one thing I noticed when you use the paint layers, when they automatically create the texture settings over here, on my bump map, if you come down to the geometry, you see it's set to a negative number. So let's go ahead and pop that up to a positive number, so that everything that's white is raised up, everything that's black is you know, engraved essentially. So So let's go ahead and set our brush to, let's make it black so we can add some wrinkles in here. And let's set the curve to be very sharp, like so. Even bring that down a little bit. So when we paint in here, well, it's supposed to be showing the, see, textured solid. No. GLSL. Well, maybe that has to be -1. Nope. Well, you're in the right layer, right? The bump, yes. Well, let me play with this and see why we're not seeing that show up as we're doing it. So stand by, I'll be right back. Well, I played with it for a little while, and honestly, I cannot find a reason why that's not working. Everything should be set correctly, but for some odd reason, it's not working. So I guess we'll just do without the wrinkles and everything. So we'll just go ahead and delete that layer. We'll grab that specular, drag him up, and I think he's a little too shiny still, so do a test render here. A little shiny, so let's set the intensity to even lower, 0.25, and the color also 0.25. So that's a little bit better. Okay, so we blended in the wrists a little bit better. Looks like we need to blend the neck a little as well. So I'm not seeing it here. Maybe if we turn on 2. No? Well, let's tab in here, and okay, it's already loaded there. Let's go ahead and just brush it in here. Make sure we got our image painting turned on. There we go. Bring up our properties over here, and let's select this color right there, and then just gently brush it in, like so. Oops. Okay, and then over here as well. Let's make our brush quite a bit smaller. Just brush that on there. Okay. So I think now we can save all of our layers and go ahead and do an F12 again, and should have a nice transition there on the neck. That's a little too light now. Oy vey. This is turning into a chore rather than fun, isn't it? Sometimes that happens when you're trying to do something. Okay, in any case, that's good for now. So we'll go ahead and save those. And before I run out of time, let's go ahead and jump in and do the eyeballs real quick. Those should be a little more straightforward. Let's see what we have. The array. Let's go ahead and kill the array. Okay, and we'll just work on this one eyeball, and then once we get it set the way we want, we'll duplicate it and drag it over. So let's tab in here and add a seam right around this outer edge. There, Control E, mark the seam, and then let's mark one about halfway through the eyeball right there. Control E, mark the seam. And one other thing we need to do before we actually start painting is let's grab all of the faces inside the iris area, Control L, and we're going to duplicate that, Shift D, on the y-axis there, and then scale it -1. We're rotating around the 3D cursor, Control comma, there we go. SY -1 there, and then this will be the lens of the eye, so let's drag that back, and let's add. Tell you what, let's move it out a little bit. Let's grab the edges right around there, and then actually let's see. Let's grab all these vertices and then deselect those edges. There we go. And we can subdivide this a couple of times so we can bring this out to be a little more round. Let's turn on our connected there. Let's select it all. Let's get rid of that loop right there. There we go. This will be a little easier to work with. There we go. Select all that and move it into where it meets up with the eyeball. There we go. Okay. Let's make it a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay. Now let's go ahead and hide that because I want to kind of do the same thing inside the iris area here. Let's select this loop here. Actually, go to vertex select mode, select all those, then edge select, deselect this loop if we can get in there. Oh, come on. There we go. And subdivide this a couple of times. There we go. And then let's do it 3 times. Where are we at here? There we go. Let's select this loop and then grab our vertices, vertex select, and this is going to be the pupil. So we'll extrude this in a little bit and then extrude one more time and then scale it. Alt-O to turn off our proportional editing. Scale that up. Sometimes this gets a little frustrating, as you can probably tell. Okay. Now, trying to figure out what I want to do next. Let's go ahead and create a new texture over here. There we go. New, and 1024 by 1024 will be fine. Let's make it white and say OK. And we'll tab into edit mode, select everything, and Alt-H, unhide that lens. And now we'll go U, unwrap. And it should unwrap everything nicely. This is going to be, this will be the back side of the eyeball. This will be the front side of the white part of the eyeball. And then this is going to be the iris and pupil. Then this will be the lens. So we can move the lens over here. It doesn't really matter. Let's move this there. Maybe scale it up a little bit. And let's rotate it around. Looks like it's a little oval shape. So let's scale it on the y-axis just a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and paint this. Let's go to UV image painting and go ahead and hit end to bring up our palette there. And let's give him kind of just soft blue eyes. There we go. Let's just paint this across there. You can make it whatever colors you want. I'm just going to go with blue. There we go. And let's add a little bit of variation, some little details there in the iris. Doesn't matter that we paint the pupil, because since I modeled it to go inside, that's actually going to be darker, so that'll be a little easier to work with. Okay, so our darker color here, set the radius way down, not to 1, but about to, let's make it 5. Set the strength up, and let's just come in here and just kind of just start painting like so. Okay, get your nice iris thing there. If you like, you can bring a photograph in and superimpose it in here, but I probably need to use GIMP to do that, and I'm trying to do everything in Blender with this series, so there we go. So just paint that up in there, and then let's grab the soften tool and set the strength way down, the size up, and let's just gently bring this in here and kind of just soften those up, and that looks a lot better. Okay, so let's go ahead and save it, rename it to eyeball underscore texture. Okay, go ahead and save the image and go to textures there. Let's call this well, Tim eyeball texture. Save. Okay, and then we'll come over here to the eyeball itself, create a new material. It's the old-fashioned way of creating the materials, like not the layer thing that we used on the body, but eye material. Okay. Create a new image. There we are. And go ahead and select the thumbnail, eyeball texture. Collapse that. Mapping is going to be UV. And set to color. Good. And also, let's set this to specular color as well, because I want to make it real shiny, and I want the white to be really shiny, but then the iris doesn't need to be very shiny at all. So set that to color, specular color. There we go. And then let's come down here, set it real shiny, and let's set it to the Ward ISO. I find that that's the nice glossiest way to get a nice sheen on there. And let's go ahead and turn on mirror. Let's set that to about 1 point, or not 1 point, but 0.15 or so. Maybe that's too much. Let's try 0.1. There we go. Okay. And maybe let's come over here and set this to be the mirror color as well. Set that to both. There we go. So the white is reflecting, but the iris part is not. Okay, so one more thing to do, and then we'll be done with the eyeball. Let's create one more material, and this one's going to be the transparent lens over the iris there. So we'll call this eye lens. Okay, and come down here to transparency. Go ahead and check that, and go ahead and set it to ray trace. Set the alpha all the way down to 0, and the IOR index of refraction. Let's set that up just a little bit. Okay, to 1.2 is good, and then change this to Ward ISO as well. Intensity 1, slope about 0.05. Okay, and then we need to come down to shadow and go ahead and check receive transparent, even though that's not really important here. We need to also set that on the eye material to receive transparent. There we go. And go ahead and select the eye lens again, material, and then select the eye lens itself over in the 3D model area, Control L, and go ahead and assign that. And then we'll tab back out. And just to get some visual representation, let's set the diffuse color of the lens to be just a little bit darker, and then we can see a little bit better what it's going to look like on our model. So okay, we got our eyeball pretty well done. Let's Shift D to duplicate it, drag it over to fit in the other eye socket, like so. And then let's give a look-see and see what that looks like rendered. And there we go. So let's zoom in just a little bit. I know I'm running way over time here. I'll just give you a better visual of what we just accomplished. I think the ambient occlusion is probably lighting up the inside of the eye, the pupil there. So let's see, one way we can fix that, I suppose. I thought we were almost done, but let's go and delete that eyeball because we're going to have to modify this one. Let's grab that lens, Shift L, select one of the vertices and Shift L, and then Shift D, duplicate it back on the Y-axis to where it's inside where the pupil would be. And then let's create one more material over here, and we'll call this one eye pupil, and this one's going to be just a solid black with 0 specular, so it's just like a black hole. And then we'll go ahead and Control L, select that whole area inside there, bring it up, and go ahead and assign that there. So now when we render, just do a quick test render just to make sure that's going to look good. And it takes forever to render the one part that we want to see. Okay, so now it's a pupil. Alright, so now we can select that eyeball. Front view. Shift D on the x-axis over to there. And let's go ahead and save. And one more render. And there we go. So we're making some progress here. Actually have our eyeballs and our face and our skin tone and everything done. So that's going to be all for part 8. Sorry this one took a little longer than the others. In part 9 we'll get in, and I guess we'll probably get in and start working on maybe his hair. So that's going to be it for part 8. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in part 9.